All right, you're going to love this. I am with a history professor from Yale University, Jay Gitlin. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for inviting me.
And one of my favorite topics is the past in history. And it happens to be that you've just edited a book called Country Acres and Cul-de-sacs. Caught my eye immediately.
Ooh, nice.
Love the cover. Now, you did this for the Acorn Club.
Yes, we did.
Tell me about the Acorn Club.
Okay, so the Acorn Club is a small group of educators, of museum directors, librarians, also scholar collectors. It's been around since 1899. They've published 38 volumes since 1899. And what they tried to do is, what we tried to do is make accessible books and collections of primary sources that are very hard to find. So we do it for students, and we're also there to promote an enthusiasm for the history of Connecticut.
I love it. And you've preserved a lot of stuff in here. And it circles around Circle magazine, which existed between, what, 1938 and 1952?
I can tell you exactly. This is why I bring notes. So Connecticut Circle magazine, it began in January of 1938. It became Connecticut magazine, so it still exists in that sense. In 1970, the subscriber list had dwindled by 1970. They were sold, and so it still exists today as Connecticut magazine. But when it first came out in 1938, and I have a copy of it here which you can show, it was like Life magazine for the state of Connecticut. It was glossy, as you can see. It had beautiful articles, many photographs, and it covered the news and features about the state.
I mourn for things like that today because they're all going away. All right, let's look at some of the pictures. So the first one is the cover. Now, the Merritt Parkway, yes?
When it first opened, as you can see.
And then on the second part, tolls, 10 cents. Now, if the tolls come back in the state of Connecticut, they're not going to be 10 cents.
Oh, no, I've heard that they're going to be even a nickel. It'll be great. And part of what you see on the top was from their special issue on the Merritt Parkway. What you see from the bottom is not from the same source, actually. It's from an ad I found, because I like to go to flea markets. It was an ad, and I believe it was for Shell gasoline. And part of the advertisement was that now, through the Merritt, you could go 50 or 60 miles without ever paying a toll. So it was trying to advertise the fact that getting from New York to places like New Haven was now going to be a lot easier. So part of that ad was, it's like you can now travel in relative ease, comfort, and without paying a lot of money.
And the Merritt Parkway was really built as a park, yes? With a road kind of through it.
Okay.
I read that somewhere.
Here's a more complicated answer. But that, if you don't mind, I'll get to a little bit of what the book's about.
That's why we're here.
Okay. So 90% of the book are reprinted articles from Connecticut Circle magazine from 1938 to 1952. I should say I first got interested in the magazine because my son brought home several issues from Whitlock's Book Barn. So if you're looking for Christmas presents, go out to Whitlock's Book Barn in Bethany.
Which is where? Oh, in Bethany.
Yep.
Okay.
So great used bookstore, still there, still wonderful. And I was leafing through and said, wow, this is really interesting. So this is about recent Connecticut history. It doesn't go back to the Civil War or the Revolutionary War. This is about the Connecticut that you might have grown up in, your parents or your grandparents. So it's recent Connecticut history. I'm getting back to the Merritt Parkway. And I looked, and so there's all sorts of fabulous, interesting things I discovered from reading through this about that time period, which we can get to. But then I realized there's something else going on. I said, okay, it talks about, there's an article about Connecticut State College. You know, before it was called UConn, it was Connecticut State College. There's a cartoon history of Yale. I found out in the course of doing this that the voice of Snow White, which also came out in 1938, was a young girl named Adriana Caselotti from Bridgeport.
Who knew? Who
knew, right? So there's all sorts of fabulous things here. But the more I read, the more I said, there's something else going on. And I was like, what else? I'm seeing something else. And historians all like detective work. So that's when these things came in, if I can show them to you. So these two things are programs from the New Haven Tercentenary of 1938, same year. And if you can see that, and on the covers, and I found this at the flea market out in Clinton, and And I looked and I said, in both of these is like a sort of a cartoonish character of a Puritan, and in one has a Puritan and an Indian. And as you can see, they're here and they're looking into the clouds, they're looking into the sky. So I read that as they're looking to the future. And what do they see in the future?
City buildings.
They see a skyline, they see skyscrapers. Yeah. And I figured what they see is New York City. And they're wondering, this is 1938, it's the tail end of the Depression, okay? So industry is sort of fading, even though World War II will pick it up a little bit. It's no longer the kind of rural state it once was, and they're looking into the future with anxiety. It's like, oh my God, is this our fate to become New York? And they don't want to be. And so then once I looked at that and I said, this is about their anxiety. They're trying to figure out what will become of us. And then I realized that this magazine not only covers the news and all these interesting things going on, it's a real estate prospectus. This is meant to say to possible readers, it's like, come on and move to Connecticut. Either be tourists, buy a second home, move
Get
here.
out of the city.
Get out of the city. It's like the print version of Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, which movie comes out in 1948. And then it hit me. So in January, I'm getting to your question. In January, this magazine begins publishing. In June of the same year, 1938, the Merritt Parkway opens. In September, the hurricane of 38 rips through the eastern oldest part of the state and tears up New London, so on and so forth. And in November, my shorthand for this is the bridge replaces the parkway. Raymond Baldwin, Republican, who's from Rye, New York, replaces the good old Connecticut Yankee Democrat, who's a New Deal Democrat, who is Wilbur Cross. And so the whole state has, in a sense, been transformed. The new center of gravity is Fairfield County, and it's like saying, come to Connecticut. Our future may not be industrial, it may not be agricultural, it is residential. And that's what I think this is really about. And that's why I had so much fun with this. And that's why we put them. So the Merritt Parkway is really, in some ways, okay, now don't laugh at me. So the following, by the time this was done and all this was in bed, I realized it's like, oh, I get it now. The Merritt Parkway is the yellow brick road. And the guy who published Connecticut Circle magazine looks oddly like the Wizard in The Wizard of Oz. And that movie came out in 1939.
How did you piece this all together? Because you're a detective,
yes,
right?
This is what historians like to do.
So you have such a mind and can pull all these facts out. You're from Long Island, but you adopted Connecticut because you went undergrad Yale, and then you went to grad school, and then you became a history professor. So you say you're from New York, but you're really from Connecticut, right?
Yeah, no, I'm from, from Long Island.
Okay.
We share the Long Island sound. It's
Correct.
okay. We're neighbors.
Yeah, no, I get it. All right, so let's look at Circle magazine.
Okey-doke.
So here's one of the covers, and this is Katharine Hepburn, who won 4 Academy Awards and arguably the most famous actress of the 20th century, and she was born in Hartford and spent her final days in Fenwick in Old Saybrook.
She was on the cover more than once.
Really?
Oh, yes. At least 3 times, I think.
I want all 3 of those.
And okay, I will find those for you. And they always refer to her as our Kate. So they just could not love her more, because not only was she a native and a good Yankee, but also she was a celebrity. And this is in a way trying to create a new national brand for Connecticut. And what better person to have as your brand spokesman than Kate Hepburn?
You met her twice.
I met her twice. I was an undergrad, and I was working someplace around the old New Haven Arena, but it was for a show. I was playing the piano for a show that starred Ann Corio, if anybody remembers her.
I'll have to look it up.
And the show was called This Was Burlesque. And I was playing the piano, and Katharine Hepburn came in to say hi to her old friend Ann Corio. And Ann introduced me, and then another time we were visiting friends of ours that lived out in Fenwick, in their house in Fenwick. Franny Fields, Bill and Franny Fields, they lived next door to Katharine Hepburn, so got to meet her a second time.
A glance with greatness.
A glance, yes. And she had such an aura, oh my God, she just elegance, you know.
No gray areas though, very black and white with her. Very black and white with her. All right, and the next picture also has Katharine Hepburn, and it also has Rosalind Russell, who was from Waterbury.
Waterbury, yes.
Yes, and Auntie Mame, one of my favorite movies, starring
Yep.
Rosalind Russell. So you talked about there were features inside the magazine. So this would have been a feature of these women from Connecticut?
They often had part of what their sales pitch was is like, look at all the famous people who have a second home. And so there's a wonderful article about Edna Ferber, who wrote Showboat. But it doesn't show Edna Ferber, the writer. It shows Edna Ferber tending her garden in Westport.
So romantic Connecticut.
It's romantic Connecticut. It's a place where stars, where artists, where creative people might want to live.
And they did.
And they did.
Lucille Ball, you know.
And they still do.
Yeah.
It's still that kind of place.
Circle magazine. So you brought one in with you. This is another. This is like come play in Connecticut, right? I would think. This is 1942.
Oh yeah, that's just like, you know, we have golf, we have sailing, we have beaches.
Now, if we come back live, here's the size of the magazine. So it was good size, not thick.
Nope.
It was thin, and this was Circle magazine. I wish it would come back. And you know, there's all kinds.
And by the way, it was Connecticut Circle.
Connecticut Circle.
Connecticut Circle.
How silly of me. So it had, you know, stories, and it had ads, and
wonderful ads, by the way.
What a thrilling thing. All right, so we have another Connecticut Circle magazine. This was the magazine of the Nutmeg State, and I'm not sure, 1938.
Now, do you see the joke on the cover there?
I do. What does it recommend?
Okay, so this is an older elite woman, and she's gardening. Of course, she's gardening with 2 servants.
Which, of course, we all do.
Which we all do. But this was part of the image they were trying to project.
Next picture is the Taft Hotel, Hotel Taft, which was in New Haven. Gorgeous place. No longer with us.
No, but it's a wonderful, late lamented place.
And in New Haven. Next one is Hi Ho, and this had to do with Rudy Vallee.
Rudy Vallee.
Did he live here?
Well, he went to Yale. He went back and forth. He was from Maine. Vallee, he was French-Canadian. He was a Franco-American from Maine, played the saxophone. And he came to Maine in part because there were more gigs down here. And he was closer to New York.
Sure.
So he very early on got a band together. Can I tell you a fast story?
I wish you would.
Okay. So I've always been interested in Rudy Vallee because he was, like me, he was somebody who came to Yale to learn, but also never wanted to stop being a musician. I had joined the Musicians Union at the age of 11 in New York.
That's a whole nother book.
So I came up here, and the minute I got here, Eddie Whitstein called me up, and I started playing Saturday. He said, "Are you busy Saturday night?" So I started working.
Why did you not become a full-time musician?
I am a full-time musician.
Well, but you're a hit, so you have 2 full-time jobs.
I play as often as I can.
The piano?
Yes.
You play anything else?
And my wife and I have a band, in case anybody's looking to a band for your wedding. It's the Bales Gitlin Band.
I love that. Let's just put it right up. The Bales Gitlin Band. How do we get a hold of you?
Just give us you can look us up, Bales Gitlin. It's balesgitlin@gmail.com.
Easy.
Very easy. And so I've always played, Rudy Vallee always played, so I've always been interested in him. And I found out that Rudy Vallee actually played for what they called a supper dance for about 500 people in one of the Yale colleges. And I thought, how wonderful is this? I am going to try to recreate this concert. But in the meantime, my son calls me up, who works at Yale. He said, "Dad, can you meet me for lunch tomorrow at Maury's?" I said, "Sure, what's up?" He said, "We're having lunch with Bill Vallee, Rudy's nephew." I said, "Okay, I'm right there," because in all the classes I teach, I always mention Rudy Vallee, because I teach a class called Quebec and Canada, where we talk about French North America. He comes up there, and he comes up when we're talking about Yale. And so the next day we have lunch with Bill Vallee, who has given many of Rudy's papers, and all this wonderful memorabilia is now at the Yale Music Library. And I met Bill, and he even gave me Rudy, his dad was Rudy's younger brother, and he used to be his bag man. He'd go around to Rudy's personal appearances.
The stories.
And would give out like little busts of Rudy Vallee, because he was a huge Hollywood star after being a radio star and a saxophone player. And so he'd give out all these wonderful little things, and so Bill Vallee, the nephew, gave me a little personal. He said this was the one Rudy had at his house, a little bust of Rudy Vallee. So
you are just full of information. We could talk to you for months. All right, that house in the country. We talked about this. So here are the houses in the country where you can escape the city. So you put all these in here, and you put the house plants.
Yeah, well, they said I picked the articles that we would reproduce, and this was, again, this was part of it, and part of what I loved about here. They were trying to promote Connecticut as a good place to go. So I made a list of all the things they were always talking about. First of all, fine schools. Connecticut has fine schools. An easy commute, and I said, well, in 1938, maybe. Low taxes in 1938, maybe. But the biggest sales point was colonial homes and history. And history was like an amenity. This is part of what they were using to sell Connecticut. And the way I say this in a book talk, I said, just like the Merritt Parkway basically bypasses Bridgeport, so does their conception, their new image, their rebranding of Connecticut bypasses Bridgeport. It's like what we're trying to connect to is not the 19th century, we're trying to connect back to colonial history. Come and buy one of these beautiful old colonial homes. So there are in fact places in Connecticut, New Canaan for example is one, that looks more colonial now than it did 80 years ago. Because some of the 19th century brick buildings were taken down and they put up colonial homes in the 20th century.
I think to find the future you have to go back to the past.
This was their whole idea.
Perhaps you need to meet with a new administration and show people the past, just for ideas.
Come on, right?
All right, typewriters to carbines. And this is Mr. Connard, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we made a lot of stuff here, a lot of firsts in Connecticut, a lot of factories, and in the final picture is Seth Thomas Clocks, another factory. So when you put this book together, Country Acres and Cul-de-sacs, did you come up with that line?
Yes, I did.
It's perfect.
Well, good, thank you.
Because I think
glad.
it romanticizes what Connecticut is. When people think about Connecticut and they don't live here, I think they think of, you know, Christmas in Connecticut.
Well, of course they do.
The snow is falling.
Which was part of the whole rebranding. Hollywood picks right up on this. You know, and Holiday Inn comes out and also in the 40s.
What didn't you put in here? I mean, because the amount of material that you had to go through, how long did it take you to do this, to edit this?
3 years.
Just 3 years.
Yeah.
And you know, you found one thing which led to another thing, which led to another thing.
I poured through it, and it was a little easier because the magazine, frankly, gets smaller and less interesting
as the years go on.
As the years go on,
really,
I thought its best years were its first decade, but I tried to find things. You know, a lot of this, Ann, was just picking. I put an article on trout fishing in there because one of my friends, Chris Coulter, hi Chris, who plays the saxophone, loves to fish. And I said, well, Chris would like this, and Chris is interested in Connecticut history. So part of it was personal. I put an article in there because I love Whitlock's Book Barn on C.E.H. Whitlock, the original Whitlock, and it's an article on collecting old maps. So, but I tried to get everybody's taste. There's an ad in there for Mounds bars, because I love candy bars, and Mounds bars were first invented in New Haven. The two Armenian brothers, and their names were?
Mounds?
Peter and Paul.
Oh, that's right.
Pelagian.
I did know that.
Yep. So
it was a trick question.
So little things like that. And so I tried to put, I put an ad of the Hotel Taft. There's a wonderful picture of oxen plowing up Temple Street from 1900. It's like, so there's a lot of wacky stuff. So I put in things about fishing, about agriculture. There's a two-page spread that shows all the locations of turkey farms in Connecticut from the 40s. It's like, okay, how much fun is this? With the idea that it would be interesting to people, it would make a great Christmas present, but also it could be something students in college and high school could use to try to really explore the history of the state.
Right, and it's a gorgeous book. I applaud you for that. Next book coming out, you have another one?
I do have 2 more books.
Are you at liberty to say?
I am. Yeah, one's going to be a history of shopping.
Like department stores?
Department stores. We're going to start off with 14th century fairs in England, and we'll probably end with Amazon. We're going to talk about 10 like major stores and developments in the history of shopping. I love things like that.
Yeah.
And another one is on French North America, and it has an unusual title. We're calling it French Face. And the reason we are is because the subtitle is Linguistic Minstrelsy, when people made fun of people who spoke French, because you know there's an enormous French a French American or French Canadian American population all over New England, including Rudy Vallee. And so we're calling it, it's linguistic minstrelsy in the appropriation of French culture in North America from 1880 to 1920.
Oh, Professor Gitlin, I know that you are from New York, but we're really glad you're calling Connecticut home for the last 50 years.
Well, thank you so much.
And thanks for bringing the history of Connecticut and Connecticut Circle magazine here.
Thank you so much, Ann.
You bet.
Spend all night kissing and the ball was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked to find myself wishing I found the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store, but mine just to save time. Skip right ahead to the last ride.